Okay, thanks everybody, and I appreciate you joining. It's kind of an unfortunate situation that we have to go to another media scrum in order to deal with all the questions that are still left unanswered from yet another announcement on education that still leaves more questions unanswered than answered. Really, and I'll just go on with a little bit of a preamble here for a few minutes and then open it up for any questions that you may have. Hopefully in the discussion that I provide, some of your questions will be answered. But to me, it seems like, and I'm sure to many teachers across the province and many parents, that it seems like a squandered opportunity to bring some relief and confidence to teachers, school workers, and parents. So much is still left optional and left up to chronically underfunded school divisions to implement. For example, I had a question right away: is exactly how many buses will be outfitted with plexiglass dividers to protect those employees from students? How many divisions are planning on making this extra expense in order to make sure that their employees are kept safe? Who will be doing the work of the extra cleaning that is being suggested? It's easy to suggest that extra cleaning should be done, but given that at least one school division just recently laid off staff, cleaning staff, and others have pared down maintenance and cleaning staff to bare bones minimal cleaning for several years now, who's going to be doing that work? We know that teachers won't be able to do that work because they'll be busy addressing the educational needs of students who some now have been without education based on whatever response they gave to the emergent online teaching for the last 3.5 months. And so we know that some students are going to present in September with significant educational gaps, and that is where teachers are going to be focusing their attention, as well as, of course, mental health concerns of students. And this is a stressful time for students and staff. So there's going to be lots going on, and teachers, unfortunately, it's not in our job description, but we won't be picking up extra duties for cleaning. How will classrooms be configured to support reduced contact and social distancing? Because I heard that there will be an expectation of reconfigured classrooms. We know that our classrooms are already over capacity with little room for teachers to circulate before the pandemic hit. And so, that's a concern. When students exhibit symptoms, how soon will they be tested and get their results back? Does our health system even have the capacity to get the mass testing of a school community done quickly and get results back fast to know when we have all been exposed in a school community and need to implement stricter measures or go to alternate measures? Who will be teaching students who exhibit symptoms and are sent home? We've heard teachers will not be asked to do double duty of both in-class and online learning, but there seems to be no specific direction on what happens when a child or several children must stay at home for several weeks because they're not feeling well and need to get better. Who will be handling their education? What is the plan if students pass it on to their teacher? Will there be enough substitute teachers? We're aware of situations. One school division had such a chronic shortage of substitute teachers. They ran short of substitute teachers every day for over 3 straight months last year. And given many of our substitute teachers are retired and elderly and are at higher risk should they be exposed to the virus, masks give government some credit here in that sourcing them is a step in the right direction. And I appreciate government's work on ensuring that we will have access to masks at a time when lots of people, lots of different organizations, groups, provinces, jurisdictions will be scrambling to source masks. So purchasing them is a good move. However, they should be implementing them as mandatory for all students right from pre-K to grade 12. And that's in part through consultation I've had with some kindergarten and pre-K teachers who say we should be expecting younger children to wear masks. They can learn to wear masks. They are capable of that. And they should be declared as mandatory for all who enter our schools. Having the next 3 weeks to get students used to masks, used to wearing masks, would substantially reduce student anxiety and allow parents an opportunity to get their children used to wearing them prior to entering our schools. And that's a concern, is there going to be a stress at the last minute as the second wave hits and a spike in numbers, and all of a sudden it's determined, oh, now students have to wear them. Well, wouldn't it be nice if we had 3 weeks right now for parents who would, optional of course, but be able to work at reducing the anxiety of their children on wearing a mask at home and get them used to the idea of it. Why are there stricter conditions for the upcoming election with more PPE and money spent on that election night than is being spent and concerned with our schools? Why are there more restrictions in our grocery stores than in our overcrowded schools? I don't believe it is reasonable to consider each classroom, as I heard, each classroom would be considered a cohort. However, even if you do consider each classroom as a cohort, each night students go home to their parents and possibly ride the school bus with no social distancing. And so each day they enter into their cohort, they're exposing a risk to that cohort because they have been exposed to their families and exposed to other students on the bus outside of that cohort. So it really, it doesn't make sense to take that type of belief that students are, their classroom is a cohort. We've heard that measures will be ramped up when things change, but what does that look like? Who will make those decisions? And those are some of the things that teachers want to know, is when we hit this level, we will make this decision and move to this change in our actions. But without knowing at what level, I mean, we've seen numbers increase steadily for the last little while here in Saskatchewan. And so why would we not decide right now that we're going to more extreme measures? The idea of how many students need to get sick before we take this more seriously. So there's still so many specific details that teachers and parents want to hear in order to know and have confidence that our schools are truly safe spaces. And we now have about 3 weeks in order to get this right. So time is ticking, and unfortunately, like I said at the start, this seems like a bit of a squandered opportunity to provide relief and reduce the anxiety of both students and staff and parents across the province. So with that, I'll open it up to any specific questions. I'll just go now down to the question and answer and see, or sorry, we're not going to the question and answer. We are going to the attendees to see who has their hand raised. Is that right, Jay? Okay, and I've got Zach Becerra. So if you could turn on his mic.
Hey there, can you hear me, Patrick?
I can, yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. I know there's a lot of us probably on the line all at once. One thing that kind of struck me, I know the STF has been involved on the committee that was struck by government to review and approve these school division plans. Did you have any inclination that this plan in its current format was coming? Was there a canary in the coal mine, as it were?
No, I didn't. And technically, work on committees should stay within the committee, and people should be free to discuss options without, freely discuss and plan at those levels. But ultimately, it's government that passes and approves these plans, and it's the Chief Medical Health Officer who signs off on them as well. So they have the ability to change information that may come from the response planning team as well. Ultimately, I believe it's government that owns this plan, and government has the ability to provide school divisions with funding in order for them to make decisions that are best made in student and staff best measures for their safety. And we would expect that happen. So while the response planning team is a committee, and while we do have one member on that committee, ultimately we expect government to make decisions based on their employees to make sure that they're safe in their workspace and to make sure that students across the province are safe as well. And so we'll go now to Emily Leadham.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Great, thank you. You mentioned something about the cleaning resources, janitorial staff already being kind of reduced over the years and funding not being adequate in that area. Can you speak to what the impact is on teachers when you do not have robust janitorial staff and support staff, maintenance staff in the classroom? How does that affect their ability to teach students and focus on their jobs?
Sure. I mean, I think anecdotally, when you've got schools that aren't cleaned as regularly as they should be, I know that we have some members who complain of kind of chronic asthma conditions or lung conditions, but at the same point, just overall, it seems like in school buildings that maintenance has been an area that has been subject to some cutbacks, and most recently, school division around Moose Jaw was one which laid off some caretaking staff. And inevitably, it either means that less is getting done around the school, or duties are offloaded onto other employees. And so we believe that our maintenance staff are an important part of the school community, and that they should be fully staffed in order to be able to do their work and feel proud about the work that they do in the keeping our buildings clean and our students and staff safe. So yeah, it's kind of just a chronic issue where underfunding has caused every school division to look at their staffing complements and try to cut back in any direction they can. And as I say, the school division around Moose Jaw, which cut back caretaking staff just recently, kind of is one that really sticks out as a strange decision, given the fact that we're in the middle of a pandemic. But that's the situation that school divisions are in right now. We know that 25 of 27 school divisions ran deficit budgets last year. So that's where we come in with the Federation and look at it and say, how can we expect those school divisions, even though there was admittedly some savings that occurred due to schools closing mid-March of last year, there were some savings that were found with that, but realistically, we'd love to see the government ensure that school divisions know that they can access money to make best decisions in the best interest of safety of staff and students. And that may mean hiring extra caretakers at this time in order to make sure that high use areas and bathrooms are kept really clean because the pandemic requires that. And just let me know if you have a follow-up as well, but I think if not, we'll go to Brady Lang then.
Hey, Patrick, can you hear me?
I can, Brady. Hi.
Awesome. So we've been hearing that some teachers have been told to speak to their doctors as to whether their health will allow them to return. And how are you guys going to handle teachers that are possibly going to be unable to work due to the underlying health conditions? And do you guys have any solidified numbers or on how many teachers are in this position?
No, we don't have numbers yet. My line to members at this point has been, if you know that you've got an underlying health condition which makes you immunocompromised, you should get to your doctor and assess that situation to be sure that you are safe going back in September. If your doctor is, if it is a substantial enough issue that you need some sort of accommodation in the workplace, then that needs to be done fairly soon, because here we've got 3 weeks to make sure that that we're ready to go for the start of September. So my line to teachers has been, you need to get on that early to make sure that there's not a big log jam of 500 teachers all looking for accommodations come September 1st. It would be better to assess those and make sure that if it's a no-brainer that some teachers should not be in the classroom or should receive an accommodation, then we need to get on that early and make sure that all the paperwork has been filed and that we know what direction that's headed so that they can staff their schools appropriately as well. So, but yeah, we are aware that there's lots of teachers who are in that situation. We also know that lots of teachers go home to family members who are immunocompromised or children who are immunocompromised. And those are the situations that I think are causing the most stress amongst teachers, is if they don't see proper safety measures in classrooms announced early enough, and it's just sort of a, well, we'll wait and see. Those teachers are really stressed because we'll wait and see isn't good enough for them.
Okay, and just one quick follow-up.
Mm-hmm.
If that does actually end up happening, like there is a shortage in teachers, what are you guys planning to do? Is there anything temporary or anything early on that you guys are kind of thinking of?
No, and that's the concern, is that we should be thinking about this now. We know that, as I said earlier, one school division had a daily shortage of substitute teachers for 3 months straight last year. And so that type of situation during a pandemic, when teachers may feel, have a fever one morning and think, I can't go in if I've possibly got the COVID-19, then I should not be going into school, and we need somebody to cover their class. And so the problem, of course, is many substitute teachers are retired teachers who are in their 60s and probably should not be exposed to the virus as well. So it's a real difficult situation that we would rather have some plans for now, as opposed to allowing this situation to hit September 19th or October 5th. We can foresee these problems and should be discussing them now, and maybe that means that some schools go a little overstaffed at this point, you know, starting in September, and in order to be able to redistribute them as the situation unfolds. But at the same point, if we allow them to leave the province, you know, any new teachers out there who don't have a contract get signed into other provinces, then they're gone, and we won't be able to hire them once the urgent need hits. So it is a concern, and it's one that should be dealt with earlier rather than waiting for it to happen.
All right, thank you.
No problem. Thanks, Brady. Zach, I've got you on again.
Yes, thanks for taking 2 questions from me. I really do appreciate it. I guess I wonder, what is your next move, given that you're unhappy with these measures? What arguments are you going to bring to government to try and get some change here, and what leverage do you possess at this moment?
Well, and we're trying to be reasonable in this situation too. We know that this is a difficult situation for government to be in, and we're not wanting it to be a situation where it's a case of I told you so mid-September or mid-October, and because that's harmful to our members. We want our members to go through this as kind of fluidly and seamlessly as possible as well. We do have a meeting booked with the minister next week, and we'll be sitting down with him and expressing our concerns. You know, hopefully that the government will take our advice and be able to make some changes. I know that many teachers have been writing into government specifically. I know that writing in as a union sometimes has less effect than 100 members or more writing in and saying, this is my specific situation of my child at home who's immunocompromised, or my husband who's immunocompromised, or whatever the situation is, teacher themselves. So sometimes that has more effect, and we're hoping that government will listen to those situations, listen to the parents that have concerns with sending their children, and tighten up the measures. I would have been a lot more relieved if I heard this afternoon that masks were mandatory in all school buildings. That would be one thing that I would say, fantastic, that's a good start. Just sourcing masks isn't good enough. We need to enforce their use, because otherwise, and waiting until it gets worse really seems like a strange move. So we know that there's lots of cases out there, and we know that that it's better to be preventative than waiting for an outbreak. So we'll continue advocating for our members. It is a bit frustrating in our position. We'd love to hear that our employers are making every precaution to keep us safe, and yet at this point we're not seeing it, and so we'll continue the pressure on them and kind of go from there. So we have had some members ask about situations of refusing to work, and at this point we're not encouraging that. We're saying let's just give it a bit more time, and hopefully government will come around and we'll be able to know that we're confident in getting into our schools. And that's the frustrating thing, I think, as well, is that teachers want to get into their classrooms. Teachers want to be in front of their students. We just want to make sure that it's done as safely as possible. And sometimes that means just spending a bit of money to make sure that there is some personal protective equipment, and that some attention has been paid to social distancing. Maybe some portable bathrooms are brought in, because we have a shortage of sinks in many of our schools because so many portables are added on, and bathrooms are never added on with portables. It's only portables. So we have some schools that are at 800 or 900 students that were built for 400 or 500 students, and there's no extra bathroom space for those extra 300, 400, or 500 students. So lots of questions that we have, and teachers know that it's a busy time at the end of August and a busy time leading up to the school year. And so we want to make sure that that there's adequate time, and that we're not just waiting as a ticking time bomb, waiting for this to go off, and it could have been prevented, because we all know what the problems are.
I can ask one brief follow-up. I know that Minister Wyant has previously pointed to the $200 million contingency fee that exists across government as maybe a way of supplementing some of the costs that this might bring. Is that going to be something that you're talking about come next week, or is your position that you need a specifically earmarked chunk of change to do these things we're talking about?
Yeah, I think it's nice to say that there's money out there, but at the same point, I'm not sure that school divisions are really encouraged to find ways to make sure that that money is accessed. And so I think it's kind of a case of money's out there, but don't use it, because if you use it, there'll be kind of a stigma to your school division because you've got some savings from last year and that should be enough, and make do with what you have. I'd love to hear school divisions saying we need several million of that, and we're going to put up partitions, plastic partitions for bus drivers to keep them safe. We're going to have a partition around teachers' desks to make them safe at certain times of their teaching day. And or figure things out and access that money. I worry that school divisions are maybe caught up in the kind of same old. We'll just get ready for school startup, and there's, it would be too much of an intrusion to try to figure out social distancing. So we'll just, government says we don't have to do that, so we won't. Government says we don't have to put up plastic partitions, so we won't. Government says we don't have to wear masks, so we won't. And so we'll just work within what government is suggesting, as opposed to what government is saying must occur. So yeah, I feel like that it's kind of an idea that there's some money out there, but that realistically you shouldn't be asking for it because it's not intended for your schools. So I'm hoping that school divisions, it would be nice to see what that budget is being spent on, if school divisions are accessing it. And that's the problem with the Teachers Federation, is we don't have access to those numbers. But maybe media would like to ask government at some point, so who is spending money? How many partitions in school divisions buses have been put up? How many, where's this money going? If it is being accessed, if it isn't, then why not? Where, shouldn't they be using it to make sure that employees are safe and that students are kept safe? So we'll go to Brady Lang.
Hi. I understand that each school division has a little bit of leeway when it comes to the actual plans that are put in place. In your guys' mind, do you see that there's any bias towards the rural versus urban schools, or is this plan more all-encompassing for everyone right now? Just obviously there's different demands for both.
Yeah, no, off the top of my mind, it's a demand that's across the province, and from the south of the province right up into the northern communities. In my belief, every school, every student, every teacher in a school, every school staff member, every parent entering a school should be wearing a mask, and that's universal right across it. When we see there's outbreaks on Hutterite colonies, we know there is outbreaks up in the far north. So this virus isn't selective of rural or urban. It's not selective of high school or elementary, even though there's some talk of elementary kids being less susceptible to the symptoms, but being more asymptomatic. So I think it's a case of really having a kind of a one-size-fits-all approach. We know that there are more, I believe I would be fair in saying there's more difficulties with higher class sizes in the urban settings than in rural Saskatchewan, but at the same point, because I know that rural Saskatchewan, they have issues with class complexity as far as teaching many multi-graded classrooms, which makes it very difficult to teach out there. But at the same point, in rural Saskatchewan is where you often see the class sizes of 35, 36, 37 students in a class that was maybe built for 25. And so, so yeah, there are some minor differences, but for the most part, with this virus, we know that everybody in a school building should be wearing a mask, and that should be enforced the first day and get students used to wearing them now over the summer. Some parents could work with their kids. I saw one thing online of a parent saying, I'm not letting you use your device, your laptop or your phone, unless you're wearing your mask. And so it kind of incentivizes wearing a mask while the student wants to use their phone. So there's lots of ways that parents can incorporate into having incentives for kids wearing a mask, getting used to it, so that when September rolls around, it's second nature to them. I always say they all come with t-shirts and jeans and shoes. They can get used to wearing a mask as well. And so it'd be nice if that was enforced straight off.
All right, and with extracurriculars, what is STF's take on those continuing, and how many recommendations are going to be put forward when it comes to the actual fall when extracurriculars can start to continue?
Mm-hmm. I think as far as extracurricular, like we've just come through half of March, April, May, and June with limited ability to reach students with emergent online instruction. Some students really took advantage of that opportunity, and some students didn't take advantage of it. And so we know that that come September, there are going to be significant academic gaps in student learning, and some students will effectively have missed 3.5 months of the last year of school. And so to get them up to speed, or, there's lots of pre-teaching that will need to be done in order to pick up where teachers normally do that. And so I would say the educational needs of students come first, and teachers are going to have a lot of work to do to get students caught up. So personally, I think, and the Federation, I believe, would say that extracurricular should come secondary. And maybe it is best to just put a pause on extracurricular in order to allow teachers to focus on their prime objective, which is educating students. That said, I know that many teachers absolutely love the extracurricular portion, and that's part of why they come to work, is because they love their extracurricular offerings so much. But at the same point, I believe this is a time where maybe we should say it's one extra item that we have to make extra provisions around, and maybe this is a situation where we just say, let's put a pause on extracurricular for the first semester at least, and then assess it from there.
All right, thank you.
No problem. Zach. Did you have a question, Zach? I think you're on mute. Are you still with us, Zach? Oh, no, okay. Okay, well, I don't see any other questions. Are there any last minute questions that anybody wants to raise, or are we okay at that point then? Tammy.
I'm just calling from a parent's perspective. What would you like to see parents do? Number one, and I'm assuming it's up to divisions to try and figure out, the physical distancing. And I've got 2 kids that are going to be in high school this year, and a big one where, physical distancing is next to impossible. So is that anything that you can talk about, or is that just strictly the divisions?
I think it's best to contact the division in those situations. I went to a large high school myself. I don't know how they're going to arrange this. It's really frustrating, and I think that's one of the biggest frustrations the Federation is facing right now, is the fact that we're hearing inconsistent messages. The Chief Medical Health Officer is saying one set of standards for the regular public: practice social distancing, wear a mask, hand wash lots. And then when we get into our schools, we know that we can't practice social distancing. We know that masks are said to be optional up to this point. And we know that hand washing facilities aren't good enough in our schools because they weren't intended to be used as regularly, and they weren't, the schools themselves weren't intended for as many students as they're seeing at this point. So I think it's best to talk with the school division officials to make sure that there's that there's provisions in place, and let them know if you're displeased with the measures that are put in place in your specific school. And then there's always the option to write to your MLA and let them know. I think pressure on government is one of the best things to get government to respond to concerns, and education is definitely in their purview, and they should be making sure that students and staff are safe in our schools come September, especially in the midst of a pandemic where we know what needs to be done. So those are a few measures, but yeah.
Oh, that is good. That answers my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, well, if there are no other questions, we'll handle any other interviews or questions through the regular source. You can contact Courtney then and get in touch with her if you would like to do a separate interview down the road, if there's more information that comes to light and you want to comment on it. But other than that, I appreciate your time, and thanks for joining us, and hope to talk to you soon. Thanks.